We are about to welcome a Texan who has transplanted into Denver. His name is Dwight Clark. He is really awesome. And if you guys have been involved back in like the 2015 legislature, you probably remember him as a staffer for Senator Jose Menendez. He really championed a comprehensive medical cannabis bill and really did a lot of work with the senator to make sure that all patients could be represented. But Dwight is actually in Denver. He serves as a senior policy analyst and a technical writer for Vicente Sederberg. And since he is very knowledgeable in both policy and legislators, I'm going to turn it over to Dwight so that he can talk about some best practices with us. So I'm going to go ahead and spotlight your video now, Dwight. There you go.
Awesome. Hi, Jax. Hi, friends. It's great to be talking to my Texas NORML friends. You guys do such tremendous work on the ground. Today, I'm going to talk to you guys about political advocacy. I know Heather Fazio is following me. You heard from Joe Moody earlier. These folks are all stellar advocates in the movement, and I would encourage you to follow their lead. You know, while we are talking about a serious issue, getting folks out of jail, ending prohibition, making sure that folks have access to the medicine they need and deserve, it still is 420. And I thought I'd just start with a little dad joke. That's my favorite 420 dad joke. And it's, what kind of vegetable likes to get high? A baked potato. All right, just a little levity to open this up. My name is Dwight Clark. I worked in the Texas legislature for about 5 years, and I was the principal cannabis staffer on the Hill there. I worked for Senator Jose Menendez, who filed the first comprehensive medical cannabis bill. And that's really how I got involved in the movement and met wonderful folks like Jax Finkel, Heather Fazio, Les, Dave Bass. And I could go on and on and on about the folks that have really moved the needle going forward in the legislative advocacy realm. I now work for Vicente Sederberg. We're a national cannabis law firm where all we do is we work on cannabis policy and business regulations. And I manage the Oklahoma, Michigan, and Texas programs. It's really exciting to still be involved in Texas and get to work with folks that are on the ground there. And I still have a lot of family that live in the state. So every year in Texas, we've seen tremendous progress from when I started in 2013. You know, we couldn't even get a hearing on a medical cannabis bill. And to see over the years, each year we've seen another bit of progress going on to where over half the House voted in favor of medical expansion, because this is medicine that patients need and deserve. But the only way that this is all possible is if we come together and continue to advocate for and continue to push our legislators. And so that's what Jax asked me to talk about today. The first thing that you need to do in order to reach out to your legislators is look up who represents you. It's as easy as going on Google and finding out who your state senator is and who your state representative are. There's a good chance in Texas that if you have your state representative is supportive of the movement. Like I said, we were able to get over half the House sponsors to support medical cannabis. The big push that we're going to see in 2021 is on the Senate side. So it's really important that step number one for engaging your legislators is to figure out who your legislator is. You'd be surprised the amount of folks that don't know where to start and don't realize the first place to start is just looking up who represents you. So once you know, and I'm cheating at my notes here. Once you know who represents you, it's important to understand what motivates you. Right? Folks are in this movement for a lot of different reasons. Maybe you were negatively impacted by the war on drugs. You were arrested for a simple cannabis possession, spent way too long in jail, and had to spend way too much on restitution fines. So maybe just basic decriminalization is what motivates you and what's your driving passion. For some folks, it's all about medical advocacy and medical access. I work with a profound group of moms called the Texas Mamas, whose children suffer from autism and intractable seizures. For them, it's all about using cannabis as a medicine. You know, these families didn't come to the medical marijuana movement because they saw a movie. You know, it's because they treat cannabis as a medicine of last resort. They've worked and tried every other medication for their kiddos, but the only thing that works to help calm their nerves, to help de-escalate that seizure is medical cannabis. I know we'll hear from Dave Bass, who's just an incredible advocate and hero, personal hero of mine, who uses medical cannabis as a form to treat PTSD. So there's a variety of medical conditions that come along with medical cannabis that can treat it, and maybe that's one of your big motivating factors. As I work outside of Texas and into some of the adult use markets, like Jack said, I live here in Denver, work a little bit in the Colorado market. I do think that there's value to taxation and business entrepreneurial opportunities. So maybe that's your issue. I know Susan Hayes later on is going to talk about the fiscal impacts, and Representative Joe Moody mentioned that earlier on the stream. But I do think that there is a strong possibility that we could use the economic argument in the 2021 legislative session when Texas has a giant budget hole, whether we're going to use that to also talk about expanding medical or to talk about adult use. That could be another motivating factor, is just getting more dollars into the Texas budget. So after you've looked up who represents you, you've decided, all right, this is my motivating factor. The next thing that you want to do is you really want to follow your elected officials on social media. You know, I think in quarantine, we're all on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, way too much than we need to. Know that your elected official is too. At the end of the day, they're just a person, and politicians and elected officials love social media because it allows them to connect to their constituents as well as, you know, inflate their ego a little bit. One of my favorite stories about why you should engage with your representatives on social media is I was staffing Senator Menendez in a committee meeting. I had created this really thick binder, lots of nuanced questions to ask the committee member. And what he did was he pulled up his phone and he started asking questions on Twitter. And I was like, sir, I've written all these questions for you. These are great. This is what you should ask. And he goes, listen, they're not my constituents. You're not my constituent. My constituents are on Twitter. They're telling me to ask this question to this person. And so politicians are really engaged online, and especially in the time of quarantine, and you know, we're all isolated in our homes, you're going to start to see elected officials move their advocacy online. That's the only way that they're able to connect with voters. So whenever you follow your elected officials on social media, I would strongly encourage you to participate in virtual town halls. I have a feeling that a lot of elected officials leading up to the November campaign and election will start hosting these. And it's important that you are engaged and online when you're talking to reach out to your representatives, especially in time of quarantine. You know, whether that's a campaign event, whether that's a virtual town hall, it's really important to stay engaged on their socials. And you'll also be able to learn a little bit more about them. Like, what does the elected official care about? What does your state senator care about? Are they a doctor? Do they care about medical access? You know, do they care about criminal justice issues like Representative Moody? It's just important to understand where they're coming from and how your values align. I also want to touch briefly on attitudes. It's really, really important that you have a positive attitude when you're engaging with an elected official or a legislative staffer, such as myself. We're in a unique situation where we're trying to get more people to our side. We want more people to join the movement, and you're never going to be able to get anybody to join the movement if you shame them or if you get upset at them. If you come into an elected official's office and start yelling at them for not supporting cannabis reform like you want them to, they're just immediately going to shut down, and we're never going to be able to persuade that person to the other side. We're in a unique movement, I think, where we have to be very forgiving in order to get folks over to our side and convince them to join the right way, right? If you're a drug war dinosaur for decades and decades and decades, and that's your elected official, and suddenly you're the one that's able to convince them to vote right on a bill, we need to welcome them with open arms instead of just blame them for past behavior. We always have to give every elected officials the benefit of the doubt in this movement, because that's how we're going to convince them to come over to our side. And when they do, we definitely want to welcome them with open arms, be supportive, and all that jazz. So I think it's important that from now until November, elected officials are on the campaign trail. They're going to be online, like I mentioned, and there's excellent opportunities to engage with them there. Ask them questions here or there, introduce yourself, see if you can get a phone call. Phone calls and emails are a great way to connect with your elected officials. And it's important, this is something that not a lot of folks do, but I would really recommend it, is you want to track your meetings and your engagements with your elected officials. So if you know, hey, I engaged with the elected official, we chatted on Facebook on 420, And then I look at my meeting tracker and realize it's been a month since I've reached out to them again. It might be time to engage them again and then track that. And that way you're accountable to yourself. And you can also be like, hey, representative, this is what I chatted with you about. A good friend of mine, his name's Larry Johnson. He was a huge advocate for the individuals with disabilities community, especially those that suffered from blindness and visual impairment. I didn't know anything about the movement when I started, especially about getting better access to folks with visual impairments. But Larry Johnson would call me every week to give me an update on his advocacy efforts, to ask me what was going on in the Capitol. And just being able to develop that one-on-one relationship with him, that's what your ultimate goal was. And I was able to brief my boss, Senator Menendez, on the issues, and he ended up, voting right, sponsoring some bills, and really pushing the issue forward. And that's all because you had one constituent who was passionate about the issue continue to engage the legislative office and made sure you stayed in their ears. Because ultimately, this is about building a relationship with the elected official and the elected official staff. And so tracking your meetings will allow you to follow up, follow up, follow up. Those are the most important things that you can do whenever you're reaching out. And then hopefully by the time the 2021 legislative session rolls around, we have, at least suppressed the coronavirus, found a vaccine, and constituent services will be able to happen again. We don't know what the Capitol is going to look like, but I'm an optimist. You have to be an optimist in this movement. And, you'll really want to show up at the Capitol and meet with your elected officials. Heather and Jax do a great job each year advocating big legislative days. They'll let you know whenever the committee hearing is so that you can go and testify. They'll let you know when there's a rally. They'll let you know when you need to pick up your phone and call your legislator. But when that happens, you want to be able to show up to the Capitol. You want to be dressed professionally. You want to have your talking points prepared. And hopefully the relationships that you've developed from now until election day, until 2021, those will pay off. And they know that when you walk in their office, that you're the cannabis policy guy. And they're going to trust you to provide the best information. They're going to know how this issue personally affects your life and the lives of your friends and family so that you're able to be more persuasive. One of the last things that I want to talk about is, follow your leaders on here. We're very, very fortunate to have Heather, Jax, Dave Bass, and I can go on and on, are phenomenal legislative advocates. I learned how to be a cannabis advocate by watching them. So definitely sign up to all of, whether it's Texas NORML, whether it's Informed Foundations, whether it's Texans for Responsible Marijuana Policy, if you're a Texas veteran, Dave Bass groups. But these are the folks that have been on the front line and know the secret passageways in the Capitol and how to get quickest from this office to that office, or really what's tracking what's going on. And so rely on your organizations and your action calls that you receive in your emails, and be sure and follow up on those. Those are the really big things. You want to stay engaged, look up who you are, number one, who represents you. Number two, follow them on social media. Number three, start engaging them between now and the campaign season virtually if there's no campaign events. And then when the 2021 session rolls around, follow your leaders, continue to develop that personal relationship, and continue to go to the Capitol and advocate.
Awesome. Thank you, Dwight. I remember the first legislative session where I could make it from the E2 hallway all the way up to the 4th floor without using an elevator. I was like, oh, I'm grown now. I'm grown. So I know what you're talking about. And, because Texas is so big, I think that, Heather and I and others have really had to kind of engage preemptively a little bit in some virtual activism. So hopefully that's going to help make it a smooth process into the next legislative session. We're not sure if 150 person Zoom call or how, public hearings will be held, but all of the points that you made were very thoughtful. And actually, I put in the comments of the stream a link to our 5 steps for getting involved. You laid out quite a few of those and then a few more. So people can click on that and it'll get them a quick link to make sure that they're registered to vote and tuned into everything that they need to do. So thank you for joining us from Denver, the land.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys so much for having me. Whatever I can do to help the Texas movement, I'm all about it.
I know you are, and we really appreciate your help.